And just a reminder, if you could also state your name and position for Hansard 2, given you are coming in via video conference, that would be very helpful. We can't hear you at the moment, I'm afraid. I'm also wondering whether, I believe that representatives from the AAT are on the line and have activated their video link. I just ask if they could turn off their video link for the time being, please. No. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me from the Royal Commission? Oh, yes, right. Yes, so you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Is there anything that you can do to activate your audio? That sounds like I can hear something.
Official Secretary, can you hear us now?
Yes, we can indeed.
Thank you.
So I'm just asking, would you like to make an opening statement? And if so, if you could just introduce yourselves as well, please.
I shall. It's Paul Crone, Official Secretary with the Disability Royal Commission, and I'm joined by Emma Appleton, our Head of Corporate, and Joe Carey, who heads up our engagement team with me this afternoon. I won't make an opening statement. I would simply like to thank the committee for agreeing together for us giving evidence this afternoon via video conference. The Royal Commission has a hearing in Sydney tomorrow, so the committee's understanding in that regard is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
It is our pleasure. We will now go to questions, and I give the call to Senator Steele-John.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll go my first question to Mr. Crone. Given the suspension of public hearings during COVID-19, the chilling effect created by the absence of adequate privacy protections and confidentiality protections until now, and the breadth of work contained within the terms of reference, I'm just wondering if you could give us an idea of what impact refusing a 17-month extension to the DRC's lifespan would have upon the Commission.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I think the Chair is on the public record on a number of occasions of saying he's requested government a 17-month extension till the 29th of September 2023. The reason he did that, and this is on the public record, that in addition to the delay to our public hearing and other programs in relation to COVID-19, notwithstanding that the breadth of our terms of reference is such that in his view, he was always intending, I think, to go back to government to seek an extension. And in any event, given the nature of the breadth of those terms of reference, and the fact that we're still dealing with some COVID matters for that matter in terms of doing the work of the Commission, the Chair was keen to ensure that we could do all the things that we needed to do as required of us via the terms of reference. And in his view, he believed an extension until the end of September 2023 was what was required.
Can you just expand a little on what you said? There are still some ways in which the Commission's work are being impacted by COVID. Could you outline those for us?
Well, for example, we haven't been able to undertake a hearing or very much engagement work in person in Western Australia, for example.
I've noticed, yes.
Yes. Also, it's very important, given the terms of reference and the nature of the work we're required in terms of engagement with First Nations, persons with disability. Our intention always was and remains to do visits to Central Australia and Northern Australia to meet with those groups and those communities. It's important in terms of setting up public hearings that we establish those relationships and trusts with those individuals. And because of COVID, we essentially haven't been able to get back to those areas since February, March 2020. So our inability to actually undertake that engagement because of COVID-related matters means that any hearings that we were going to do into First Nations matters in that regard have slipped and will go down our program.
Okay. And looking at the number of submissions that you've received to this point, given where we are. It seems to be we're on. There are lower numbers so far than in previous royal commissions at this point. Do you feel that COVID has had an impact on the ability of the disability community to make submissions to the Commission and undertake that work?
Senator, I'll just pass to Ms Carey in a moment, but as you're probably aware, we've just passed the 2,000 submissions number for the Commission. In addition to, we've had over 8,000 calls to our hotline. Ms Carey might have a more granular idea, but certainly we've continued to receive a steady flow of submissions to the Commission as well as inquiries to our hotline. But I might ask Ms Carey if she has a particular view on that.
Senator Joanna Carey, Assistant Secretary Engagement. We've certainly we've received over 2,000 submissions to date. It's not a disappointing number of submissions from our perspective. However, obviously we would like to get as many as possible. As part of getting as many submissions as possible, being able to engage directly with communities is an important part of that. So that has obviously been heavily impacted by COVID-19 and the restrictions, the border restrictions in place.
Absolutely.
We've continued to do a large number of engagements, but they've been conducted virtually, and it would be fair to say that most of those to this point have been with stakeholder groups rather than people with disability in the broader community, which is something that once we can travel safely again and we are recommencing some face-to-face engagements, we'd like to do more of that work to further increase the amount of engagement of people with disability in both the submissions and private session process.
Excellent, thank you, Ms Carey. So just to clarify, the impact of COVID-19, you feel that COVID-19 has impacted the number of submissions that you've had, and it has also meant that you've had to engage with more organisations rather than individuals, for instance.
Certainly. I mean, it's hard to say with any certainty what would have happened without a global pandemic interrupting things, but I certainly would have hoped we'd have more submissions, yes.
And do you think that that is potentially a driving factor? I know there's been some commentary around the percentage of folks appearing before the Royal Commission and the extent to which they have been disabled people themselves. I think the Commissioners quoted a figure of 22.5% of witnesses being disabled people. Do you think that has in some way been impacted by COVID as well?
Senator, it's difficult to know and difficult to say. I think what is worth putting on the record, though, is that our terms of reference are very, very broad and require us to inquire into a broad range of matters, particularly through our public hearing process. There has been some public commentary, and it's worth taking the opportunity now, I think, to correct some of that. People with disability are clearly at the centre of all of the work that we do within the Commission, including our hearings. But there are many reasons why it's not only desirable but necessary to call evidence from witnesses other than people with disability recounting their stories. And I'm sure you would appreciate this. As you know, there are some parents or supporters of people with cognitive disability who give evidence in conjunction with and are essential support for people with disability. There are those who provide cultural support to people with disabilities, we saw in public hearing 11. Some are parents and supporters of or advocates for people with disability who cannot safely or without risk of trauma tell their stories in person. Some are government witnesses who are called to explain policies and practices which are under scrutiny and whose appearance is essential as a matter of law for reasons of procedural fairness. There are some representatives of other organisations whose actions are under scrutiny and who also must be given the opportunity to appear and give evidence for exactly the same reasons. Some are researchers and experts who may or may not have a disability, whose evidence is necessary to investigate and evaluate proposals to address violence, abuse, neglect and exploitation of people with disability, which are matters at the heart of our responsibilities under our terms of reference. Some are representatives of advocacy bodies, many of whom are not in fact people with disabilities themselves, but nonetheless wish to put their experiences and proposals to the DRC on behalf of people with disability. And some are practitioners in education, health and criminal justice and other fields that may not be people with disability, but whose insights are essential to understand the problems and identify solutions as part of our inquiry. And finally, there are First Nations people who explain the reality of intersectionality or multiple forms of disadvantage that are expressly recognised in our terms of reference, and it's extremely important that we hear from them. So there are many reasons as to why we call individuals to give evidence at our hearings.
Absolutely. I think let's just park that there, because that's a separate line of questioning just for a moment, because I think we don't want to lose an important observation here. It seems to me, from what you have said so far, that with an additional 17 months, you would be able to, as a commission, go to more places, speak with more people, gather more evidence in order to support the recommendations that the Royal Commission will subsequently make to government.
Senator, I think you've very well summed up the view of the Chair and the Commissioners to the Royal Commission.
Fantastic. And with
on that note,
with
Senator Steele-John, we do need to share the call. I'm happy to come back to you if you have more questions. I now give the call to Senator Van.
Thank you very much, Chair. Are you able to advise me as to the Commission's estimated monthly costs?